Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here on the channel. Hope you all are doing well. And today we're doing our 2026 final mock draft. It's been a minute since I did my last one, but I figured I've been doing them like almost every day. Just for fun, I do a little mock draft. So I figured we'd put it into a video. And I am aware that the draft order will probably change a lot. It's changed a ton over the past few days, but I'm just going with what we have right now. And yeah, let's get right into it. We're on the website draftprospectshockey.com/simulator. I'll put it down in the description as well, but like I said, I just like whenever I'm bored, sometimes I do like a mock draft every day. It's a lot of fun. And yeah, I figured I'd put it in a video. The way we're going to do this is at each pick, I'm going to talk about what teams might do, but then the actual picks, I'm going to make like what I think my choice would be if I was the manager of that team at that position, taking into account team fit and stuff like that. I'm not a professional scout, just a guy with an opinion. So let me know down in the comments everything you disagree with, and feel free to bookmark this video for a few years when a player I say isn't very good turns into a superstar. But yeah, let's get right into it. Hope you guys can see everything on screen here. This is the draft order, and these are all the available players. This is the Prospect Don. He's the guy who runs this website. He's a great follow on Twitter as well for prospects and stuff like that. This is his ranking, I believe. But yeah, I'm just going to be making the picks. And yeah, we start with Toronto. And we got news this morning that they are making the pick. They've chosen their guy. And we also got the insider information at the draft combine that Gavin McKenna was told he was the pick. So that's who I expect Toronto to pick. And if I was the manager of Toronto, I think I would be doing the same thing. Even though I prefer Stenberg in a lot of ways, McKenna is a really good fit for Toronto, just being kind of that Mitch Marner replacement. You have him, feeding Austin Matthews. That's one of the only things that might get Austin Matthews to stay in Toronto. And yeah, he's just a super talented player. So yeah, we're going him at number 1. You can see kind of on the side here. Has that. San Jose, I have always been Ivar Stenberg at this pick, and now it's what I think they will do. I was definitely thinking there was a chance it was going to be Chase Reed, but with the Eklund trade, obviously, it's going to be Stenberg. We all know. I'm not going to go into this one too much. I do prefer Stenberg in a lot of ways. I think he's a lot more projectable. He still plays that kind of perimeter game that McKenna does, but is more willing to drive the middle. More of a play driver, I guess I should say. I think he'll fit in fantastically in San Jose. And yeah, great pick. And here's where the draft opens up. Vancouver at 3. So I don't know if they're going to go Caleb Malhotra. It makes a lot of sense. That's been the rumor. We've gotten a few reports in the last few days that it might not be the pick, but no one really seems to know what's going on. I think they're really interested in Keaton Verhoff as well. I think they see a lot of potential there. And Chase Reed, of course, being kind of the consensus top defenseman in the class. I can see him going there too. But yeah, I kind of expect them to pick Malhotra. For me, I think I wouldn't pick Malhotra for many of the reasons that are kind of getting floated around right now. It just creates kind of a weird dynamic in the locker room having Manny Malhotra there. Obviously, you value a player more than you value a coach. Like, coaches don't last more than 5 years unless you're John Cooper. So obviously, if you have the choice between, a coach you really like, but a first-line center, you're going to choose that first-line center. But yeah, it just kind of feels like a weird dynamic in the room. And if you're really forcing the pick just because the coach is the dad there, it's a cool story, but could lead to problems in the locker room. And I just don't love Malhotra as a prospect. I definitely see why you could think he would be a number 1 center one day. But I'm going with Chase Reed here. That's because I think he's the best defenseman in the draft class. I think it's closer than people say. It's not, clear cut, but the most offensively talented one for sure. And definitely has holes in his game. But at this point in the rebuild for Vancouver, I don't think they're penciling in Philip Perona because the long-term right-handed defenseman. I don't think they're penciling in Tom Willander as that guy. You just got to go best player available because this is going to be a lengthy rebuild. And Chase Reed is a great, building block piece who could be that number 1 defenseman for you. And even if he's not, I think he's more of a, top 4, definitely top power play guy. But yeah, he's just a great foundational piece that they'll love having there for a long time. At number 4, we have the Buffalo Sabres, and I do expect them to trade this pick, honestly. obviously they got great value in the trades. I'm a big fan of every move they've done the last few days. I love the Benson extension. I love that they didn't give Alex Tuck that bag. And I really like the Bowen Byram deal, obviously. Getting the 4th overall pick is crazy. But they lost Tuck and Byram, even though I don't think they should have kept those players. Obviously, they're making their team worse in the short term. And they won the Atlantic last year. They just had a fantastic year where they were one shot away from being in the Eastern Conference Finals. And yeah, I think they're definitely going to try and trade this pick, probably for Matthew Knies. I feel like that makes a lot of sense. Connor Hellebuck makes a lot of sense as well, but we're going with the assumption that they keep this pick. And the reports seem to be that it's going to be a center, which I don't know if I really see. I think a right-handed defenseman makes a lot of sense as well. They could definitely use a center as well. But yeah, I mean, this pick is just gravy. They can, pick a guy, and he doesn't immediately have to be that core piece. They already have such a great young team there. And yeah, so Caleb Malholtra makes a lot of sense. I think if he was on the board, they would pick him. Viggo Bjork could also be, if Malholtra's gone, they probably go with the next best center. But I think they go with a defenseman, and since Chase Reed is off the board, this is my opinion, I think they should take a defenseman, and I think they should take Keaton Verhoff. I'm still a big fan of Verhoff. He's fallen outside of the top 10 in some people's draft boards, and I think that's pretty egregious. If he stayed in the WHL, he would have put up 100 points as a defenseman. It would have been unreal. Instead, he challenged himself, went to Nodak, and definitely had those growing pains. And I think ending the year with that tough Frozen Four tournament was really kind of the nail in the coffin for a lot of people, just completely selling their stock on him. But he did improve throughout the year. And he got his feet wet in college hockey. Next year, he's going to be back there. He'll have more competition on the blue line, but I think with another summer of getting stronger and being a better skater, he's going to be, the number one defenseman there. And I think this is honestly a guy who might have number one defenseman potential. He might have the highest potential of all the defensemen in this class. Even though there's obviously, he kind of reminds me of David Jiricek in some ways, and he's a big guy who maybe the hockey smarts aren't quite there to make it in the NHL. That was the big problem with Jiricek in his career so far. But I see the flashes, and I see a number one defenseman here. I think there's a really good chance, and I might even take him over Chase Reed in some situations. And I think he fits in really well in Buffalo because he doesn't have to be that number one guy. He can play that right-hand defense and play anywhere on the top 4. You already have 3 excellent left-shot defensemen there, and not Byram, in Dahlin, Power, Samuelson. So yeah, I think he fits really seamlessly there. But a guy like Viggo Bjork, Caleb Malholtra makes a ton of sense there. I think they should go with Verhoff, though. That's still a guy I'm really high on. And number 5 here to the Rangers. I think 2 players make a lot of sense. I think they will go with Carson Karels in this pick, almost no matter what. I think they see a Western Canada kid with a personality like that. We saw in his interviews was really fun. And yeah, just an excellent left shot defenseman who's going to play a top 4 role. And I almost think he's the right pick here. But given that Caleb Malholtra's on the board, I'm going to go with Caleb Malholtra here for the Rangers, just because, again, they're a team kind of like the Canucks, where they're obviously ahead of the Canucks, but they kind of need everything. I don't think you should avoid taking a right-hand defenseman because you have Adam Fox there. You're getting a guy who's over a decade younger. They just need best player available. They need centers, they need wingers, they need defensemen. They could use everything, so I think you go with the best player available. I might even think that's Carson Karels, but they just have such a need for center that I think Caleb Malholtra makes a lot of sense there. For the Flames here, Carson Karels and Viggo Bjork, I think, are the best case scenario for the Flames, in my opinion. Craig Conroy, I'm not sure what he's thinking. I think he really likes Karels, so I expect him to be the pick there if one of the 5 teams behind him doesn't pick him up. But I love Viggo Bjork. I'm going Viggo Bjork here. We just need that forward. And does he have the potential to be the best forward on a playoff team? Honestly, I kind of think yes. I like him that much. But obviously, the scouts' consensus around the NHL is not that. But I see a guy here who is just such a complimentary piece, can also drive play as well, and is just the smartest player in this draft, maybe point blank, behind McKenna and Stenberg. So smart. And yeah, he doesn't have the physical tools, obviously, but I think this is a guy you just put in your lineup and forget about. He works hard, and he's going to be a positive impact on your team. I'm just such a Bjork fan, and I hope he's a Flame. Been hoping since basically December, if we didn't get that number 1 pick, we would try and find a way to get Viggo Bjork, and I think it's a real possibility at this point. So yeah, we'll see what happens. Number 7 to the Seattle Kraken. Keaton Verhoff makes so much sense here because I think he will be on the board for Seattle. And I think that's a guy who just makes all the sense. He's a big guy who has potential to be that number 1 superstar defenseman. We know Seattle needs superstars. Out of all the guys in this draft, I think Keaton Verhoff maybe has the highest potential, even though the chances of him hitting that aren't the highest. He has insane potential. So I think he will be there for the Kraken at 7. And I think they will pick him because they can't go with forward. They need to go defenseman. And yeah, I think they will. But given the guys left on the board in my mock draft, I think Carson Karels makes all the sense. They need right-handed defensemen, but they also need left-handed defensemen. They just need defensemen, period. And I'm a big fan of Karels as well. I kind of see him projected. I think some people are a little too high on him. But the people who are lower on him, I think, are selling himself short. He's not just a safe player at all. Like, strong defensively and obviously very physical. I think he needs to pick his spots where he's being physical a little bit more. But in his offensive game, I think he's being sold short as like, oh, he's going to be a defensive top 4D. I think he has that other element to his game that he can really unlock, and I'm hoping to see him do that in college hockey this year. I think he kind of has that element of a guy like that upper echelon of defensemen in the NHL, the Cale Makars, the Quinn Hughes. I'm not saying he's those players, obviously, but I think he's shown flashes at the end of this season in the playoffs where he can maybe be that game-changing defenseman when he's on the ice. You only see flashes, and I don't know if he's going to be that at the next level, but I think there's a chance. I think there's a lot more offensive potential than we give him credit for, and obviously, even though he's not the safest defensive player, all the defensive tools are there. He just needs to work on picking his spots better, being smarter. But yeah, this is a player with, I feel like, a pretty high floor and a very high ceiling as well, and a very good pick for Seattle, and I'd be happy if my Flames got him as well. At Winnipeg at the 8th overall pick, and I think they'll definitely be thinking about Tynan Lawrence here, Viggo Bjork if he's on the board, and obviously any of the defensemen that are left from the upper tier, Albert Smets being the last one here. And in my personal draft, I think I'm going to go with Albert Smets. He's a guy I was not super high on earlier in the season when he was getting so much hype for being at the Olympics and all that. But at the end of the year, when I'm focusing more on the draft, I've grown higher on him because I think he is just a pretty safe player. I've said one of my comparisons for him is Noah Hanifin, in that I think he has a lot of the great tools, but his hockey IQ isn't high enough where he can be a game changer offensively or defensively, just kind of a solid transitional player who doesn't really blow you away, but is going to at least be even in his minutes in the NHL at the most part. And I mean, Noah Hanifin was not my favorite player on the Flames, but that's a guy who's played a lot of NHL games. He's going to be a good top 4 defenseman, even though he had a really tough playoffs. But yeah, Smits is an interesting player. I don't think he has really much of a ceiling at all to be a top pair guy, but this is a guy you kind of insert in your lineup, and he should mostly be a net positive for you. And yeah, I think he makes sense for the Winnipeg Jets, even though I don't love his ceiling. And I don't really love anything about the Jets at all. I think they're kind of hopeless. No matter who they pick, there's no one who's going to save their franchise. So yeah, I'm going with Smits here. I think that's a good top 4 defenseman for them for the future. And now we get to the 9th overall pick. And I think there's no doubt they're going to go a defenseman here. Like, almost no doubt. Maybe if Viggo Bjork is still on the board. But even then, I'd be shocked. It's going to be a defenseman, and it's going to be whoever's left from that top-tier defenseman. So I'm definitely thinking Daxton Rudolph will definitely be the pick here. But for me, personally, who I have had penciled into the Florida spot for a while, and who I now have penciled into the San Jose spot, just because I'm so high on him, even though I don't think he's in the middle of that upper-tier defenseman, I think this guy deserves a claim in that upper-tier defenseman. And wow, I have to scroll down for him. Malte Gustafsson. I am such a fan of this guy. 6'4", 200 pounds, big defenseman. Teams love that. But he's such a smooth skater. I love watching him. And I think he's just such a smart player defensively. Like, unlike a guy like Karels, who has all the tools. I think Gustafsson brings all the smarts. He's already shutting down guys super proficiently. I think there's not a huge offensive ceiling there, obviously. But Gustafsson is a guy who I think, given he's so smart in the defensive zone, and he's such a smooth skater. He's got all the tools. I think you can grow him into a really solid top pair defenseman. And the floor here is so high as well, given that he's defending against men so proficiently already. And I think this is a great pickup for San Jose. Not a flashy pick, not a Daxon Rudolph power play guy, but I think this is a great pick for San Jose here. I've been high on this guy for the second half of the season, and I think San Jose would be getting a really great player here. Now, next up is the Nashville Predators. I don't really know what they're going to do here. I don't really like any of the fits for Nashville. Like, Nashville is another team where I don't think any player here is going to save their franchise. I'm just not high on their franchise at all. I think Tynan Lawrence is going to get some interest here from them. Belchetz, obviously anyone who falls from that upper tier of defensemen like Daxon Rudolph. So definitely all of those players are in play. For me, I don't think Daxon Rudolph is in that top tier defenseman. I think he's more leading the second tier. I'm going to go with Tynan Lawrence here if I was picking for the Predators. He's a forward who I think people are still selling short because he had that great USHL season last year. Not Celebrini level, but we were thinking this is a guy who could be in first overall conversation. Went to the NCAA, and he was heating up at the end of the year. He doesn't get credit for it, but he was heating up at the end of the year. And I think he's a guy who still has 1C potential. I don't know how high the likelihood of him hitting that is, but he's a guy I'm still a fan of and is going to be a long-term NHLer, I think. And for Nashville, you just add a piece. I'm not going to try and overthink this and say, oh, this guy could be the franchise savior for Predators. No one's saving this franchise. But I think Lawrence could be a really good piece for them. Next up, St. Louis at 11. This is a really interesting pick. And again, for St. Louis, like, I don't even know why I'm making these picks because there's no way they draft 4 times in the first round, right? They'll be trading up. They'll be trading for a young guy or something like that. But I'm just going with the draft order we have. And at 11, I don't think they'll be picking here, but I think they'll be thinking about, again, any of those fallers from the defense and any of that next tier of forwards. So Ethan Belchetz will definitely be in there. Daxon Rudolph. I'm going to go with Daxon Rudolph here, I think. No, I'm not. Yeah, I am. I'm going to go with Daxon Rudolph. Rudolph is a guy I have not been that high on over this year. I feel like he puts up he puts up so many power play points. He's a really good power play guy, but he doesn't have the highest hockey IQ for me. Like, I don't always think he makes the right play a lot of the time, especially defensively, but even in the offensive zone, like, he put up a lot of points, but I don't feel like he's a real game changer there, and he also doesn't really have that defensive floor to fall back on. But this is a guy who, if he turns out perfectly, is going to be a really solid middle pair, top power play, or even second power play guy for you. And yeah, I think he has, decent potential to be an offensive, more minded guy, but I just don't really see a defensive floor there. Like he's okay. He can stick check fairly well, but doesn't have the hockey smarts. But I think at this point in the draft, I think it's a fairly weak draft. I think it falls off really hard after that top 10. And this is a guy who still brings a lot of upside, while a lot of the other guys in this range don't bring much upside at all. So I feel like that's a decent pick. For the Devils here, I'm going with Wyatt Cullen. This is a guy I was thinking about for the Blues, but I think Daxon Rudolph makes sense as well. But Cullen is a guy I am so high on. I was at the start of the year a little bit. He was a guy I liked watching from his last year tape, where we thought he might be in this range. Obviously, that big growth spurt, injuries throughout this year. I thought he looked really good at the prospects game, even though he was pretty easily the best player on the American team. In a team that was pretty weak, not really full of those star players, even though they did win the game I watched. But Cullen's the guy who brings star potential in this outside of the top tier. I think he's the guy who brings the highest star potential. Like, he could be a top line forward. He brings a lot of speed and just so much hockey smarts to his game, and he has that element. He has those hands in tight. He has those ability to make the flashy plays. And I don't really think his defensive game is that bad either. Obviously, he needs a lot of seasoning and pretty much everywhere in his game. He could be, a better skater. He could be stronger. He could basically be better at everything, but I think he's already at a pretty good point where he's able to show that star potential. I'd like to see him do it against better competition, so I'm excited to see where he goes and how he transitions to the next level and then to the NHL. But yeah, a really interesting player here in Wyatt Cullen, who I think brings star potential and could be a really good complementary winger for the Devils' top six. For the Islanders here, I think they probably go with the best forward on the board. I think Ethan Belchetz makes a lot of sense here. I think Oscar Hemming, they might go for a guy like that. For me, I'm going to go with Mathis Preston here. I am so high on Mathis Preston still. This guy brings game-breaking talent, and I think a lot of people were kind of caught up with the numbers with him this year. He wasn't a huge point producer, but he was on two teams. What was he on? The Giants and... what was the other team he was on? The Rockets? I don't know. I feel like an absolute casual for not knowing that. But when watching him this year, he just has so much talent, but didn't have anyone to finish his excellent playmaking. He has got some goal-scoring ability as well. He's a really dynamic player, and I think one of the few players past that upper tier, kind of like Wyatt Cullen, that brings that dynamic ability, that brings that star potential. And he's kind of been compared to JP Hurlburt in a lot of ways. I think Preston is just on another level and obviously doesn't have the same production, but was playing on weak teams this year and couldn't really find a fit with his line mates. And I think he's a guy who, in the right situation, could be a top-line winger. Obviously, if he doesn't work out, if he's not in the correct situation, he's not going to be a factor at all. So it's definitely a high-risk, high-reward pick. But I think at the 13 range, and especially for the Islanders, a team that needs high-end talent, he's just brings some of the best potential in this draft. So I'm a big fan of this pick at 13, even though a lot of people won't have him there. Now, Columbus is an interesting one here. I think I'm going to go with Ethan Belchetz. I think he'll be off the board by now. And he's a player I've been lower on, but I still think he makes some sense here. He's a big winger. He doesn't particularly skate that well. He has some rush offense. I'm just not a fan of his game a lot. I don't think he showed too much progression this year, but I still think with the physical tools and with that goal-scoring ability, he has that ability. Like a lot of players, they don't have that goal-scoring ability. He has that. Got to give it to him. So I have him in this range, even though I don't love him as a prospect much, and I'm curious to see where his game goes from here. He's going to college, right? I think he committed somewhere. I don't know. Again, I'm not a professional. These are not professional opinions, but yeah, Belchetz is an interesting guy, and I think could be a really solid top 6 winger. If he's not that, I don't really know what he's going to be in the NHL, but he's a guy who could score 30 goals in the NHL for sure. At the next St. Louis pick, they have back-to-back picks here, and in those top 3 picks in the lottery for St. Louis, I have to think they'd probably go 2 forwards, 1 defenseman, 2 defensemen, 1 forward. And I picked Daxton Rudolph with the first one. So in this range, I think they could be interested in a lot of guys like Suvanto, Hemming, Dagenais, Novotny, guys who are kind of projected in this range. For me, I'm going to go Nikita Klepov for the first pick as well. He's like, you kind of see what my draft mindset is here. Like some of these guys in the top 10 have such high floors and also high ceilings that I really like them. But if you're not getting a guy who's a sure thing to be a third liner or better, or a second pair defenseman or better, why not go for the guy with the upside? If you're drafting like a sure thing bottom pair defenseman, I think you're doing it wrong. I think you need to go for those upside swings. And Klepov is an upside swing. He is such a talented player. We saw in the OHL, when in the right situation, he led the entire OHL in points this year. And yeah, he's just a guy who works off so well. And he's one of those players that has that element where it seems like he's got eyes on the back of his head. He knows where everyone is on the ice. He has such amazing hockey sense. Obviously, the defensive floor is not there, but I think he brings that next level game-breaking ability that makes him very worthy of a selection at this pick, even though I don't think he's going to go there. And for the next one, I'm going with another guy who's going to fall, Ryan Lynn. Fantastic defenseman. I know I have St. Louis taking 2 right-handed defensemen here, but I think I'm just really high on Ryan Lynn. I think he's a fantastic player. 5'11 and a half or something like that. So, like, obviously undersized for a defenseman, but we've seen undersized defensemen work in the NHL this year. Look at the Carolina Hurricanes, and Lynn is just another guy where I think he's got a lot of smarts. There's definitely questions about his projectability, like what will he be in the NHL, because he's probably not going to be a top pair guy. I honestly think he's got the hockey smarts to kind of work it out. He's going to be able to find a role in the NHL. second power play. He's got good puck moving ability. At worst, I think this is a guy who you can kind of throw on your bottom pair, kind of like Shane Gostisbehere did this year for the Hurricanes. Obviously, he brings that power play ability that makes him very valuable. But when Gostisbehere is out there in 5-on-5 minutes, he's got offensive talent, but he's also smart enough to just kind of make the right play a lot of the time and, just general be positive in his minutes. And I think that's the floor with Ryan Lynn, and I think there's a really high ceiling there as well due to his hockey smarts. So yeah, I think those are two great picks for the Blues there. And number 17, very interesting pick for the Kings here. Again, I'm not high on the Kings at all. No one's going to save their franchise. I think they're definitely going to go with a center here, or one of the higher floor forwards like Oliver Suvanto. I don't even know if he'll fall this far, but I think he makes a lot of sense. Maddox Dagenet makes sense. Alexander Command makes sense. Ilya Morozov makes sense. I don't know who I'm going to go with here. It's a very interesting pick. There's guys I'm higher on. There's guys I'm not. I'm going to go with Elton Hermanson here. He's a guy who I'm higher on than most. Obviously, like, the thing with him is the attitude, the work ethic. But again, you know me, I like to take those higher upside swings when you're not getting a sure thing. There's no point in taking like a bottom pair defenseman. So I really like this pick for the Kings, even though they need the centers, obviously. I don't think there's any centers who really bring that next level game-breaking ability. Like, I don't really like Suvanto. You need a top 6 center, and I don't think you're finding it in this draft. So this is a good swing here. A guy who has so much talent, and I think he could really work well in the Kings top 6 if he works out. And yeah, he's just high offensive IQ for sure. Great puck skills, a decent shot as well, more of a playmaker. But yeah, this is a guy who brings very high top 6 ceiling, going to be a very excellent complementary part of your top 6 if he works out. If he doesn't, obviously, I don't really see a role for him in a bottom 6 or anything, but I think this is a guy with very high upside, the highest upside left in this draft, and it's a good pick. Now for the Capitals here, right-handed defenseman is probably their biggest need, but I'm not really high on a guy like Pipparainen or anything. So I'm going to go with a guy who has decent floor, decent upside in Oscar Hemming. We didn't see too much of him this year, which is kind of interesting. Obviously, big saga. He couldn't play for... Who was he trying to play for? I don't know. He ended the year with Boston College. Not a very good team. He didn't really fit in that well. We'll see where he plays next year. I think he's playing at Boston College again. But a full year, a full summer being in North America, getting adjusted, I think will do really well for him. He's a guy who we don't really know his upside because we didn't really see him that much. But he's a big guy, a decent skater who brings, high hockey IQ all across the ice. Plays a solid defensive game, and I think there could be an untapped offensive ceiling there as well. This is just an all-around really good pick who could play in Washington's middle 6 in the future. For the Utah Mammoth here, this is an interesting one as well. I think they could be in on guys like Adam Novotny. Adam Novotny feels like a Utah pick. And I almost want to take him here. He's a guy I'm a fan of. I'm trying to think if I'm forgetting anyone. Tommy Blale would be a really good pick here, actually. I'm going to go with Tommy Blale. He's a guy I'm higher on than Villeneuve at this point, just because I think he brings a little bit more projectability. Even though Villeneuve is obviously a huge, high ceiling guy, I'm a high ceiling guy, and you'll see him go in the next few picks here. But Blale is a very good player. I think I really see a top 4 defenseman with him as well. Like, obviously, I think he's a guy who has the ceiling to be not a number 1 defenseman, but, an excellent offensive defenseman on a playoff team, a guy who can play on the power play. But obviously, the floor isn't super high, but I think he's a guy where Villeneuve, I don't really see a role for him on a bottom pair at all. Blale, I could see him growing into a role anywhere on 3 pairs in the NHL, even though I don't think it's super likely. I think he could fit on a team if you develop him correctly, and he's a guy with a very high ceiling as well. So I like that pick for Utah. Buffalo here, I don't know if they'll be picking at 20. I don't know. Maybe they'll keep the 4, trade 20 for someone else. We'll see who they go with here. I'm going to go with Maddox Dagenet, though. A big center who kind of got knocked for his skating, but I don't think his skating's that bad. I think it's pretty decent. And he's a guy who I think could be a middle 6 center. He could be a top 6 center even. I don't really know what we see out of his ceiling, just because playing in the queue just doesn't really give you that good of a look. I think if we see him dominate next year in the Q, he will have a more balanced look at his ceiling. But there were times this season, even though it wasn't super consistent, where he was able to take over games. And I think that's a pretty good bet, even though I didn't see it consistently enough. At 21 here, I'm going Xavier Villeneuve, no doubt. Philly is going to make a weird pick in this spot. Like, I could see them going with Piparainen, Hackinson, Morozov. Brooks Rogowski feels like such a Flyers pick. He's the 6'7" guy, right? That feels like such a Flyers pick. And where's his name? Maxim Sokolovsky. That feels like such a Flyers pick. Put up 8 points with London in the OHL, but 6'8", you got to take him. Anyways, this is not going to happen, but I think Villeneuve is the right pick here. Just an insanely dynamic defenseman. Like, you've seen the Lane Hudson comparisons, and it makes sense. He looks like that sometimes. I think there was a lot more beneath the hood with Villeneuve's season, because obviously he didn't really improve on his point totals from last season, didn't really, advance in many ways this season, which is why he fell on a lot of draft boards, might even fall outside the first round. But I think there was some injuries there. There was maybe, some team dynamic things where he was kind of in his own head. I'm really excited to see him at BU next year, and obviously that's where the Hudsons played. I think he could really have that next level game-changing ability if he's able to find it. And obviously that's a big if, which is why I don't have him in the top 10, even though I think he has like a top 10 ceiling. But yeah, this is a guy who could be an excellent defenseman for you. And I think we've seen teams hopefully watch the Hudsons in the last few years and say, we got to take a bet on this guy in the first round. Do I think the Flyers are going to be that bet? No way. But if I was the manager of the Flyers right now, I would take him, because they need stars. They need a top pair defenseman. And Villeneuve can be a top power play defenseman if he works out perfectly. His chances of working out perfectly, obviously not that high. But yeah, could be an interesting pick for sure. For Pittsburgh here, I don't really love the drafting they've done the last few years. Ben Kindell is obviously a great pick, but I'm going to go with Adam Novotny here, I think. Yeah, Adam Novotny. Very strong player who I think could just projects as such a perfect middle six complementary winger. Physical, strong enough defensively, and still has that offensive ceiling to hang with the big guys. I also think he might have an untapped ceiling here. He really showed some great goal scoring ability this year, and also he led the Petes in points. He was the big guy for them. So I think we could see, obviously he projects as a really good complementary piece, but we'll see what he can do when he's maybe put on a really good team with some really talented players. Maybe he could really elevate his game to the next level and be a great NHLer. I think there's definitely a chance there. For the Boston Bruins here, I'm going to go with Oliver Suvanto. He's a guy I've definitely been lower on than most, I think, in this draft cycle. Like, he's been put in the top 13 now. I don't really see it at all. I think this is a guy who is such a third-line center. Everything about him just screams third-line center. And even though I'm more of a ceiling guy, I think he still deserves a pick in the first round just because he does look like such a sure thing for there. I haven't really seen, I've really been trying to find any offensive, next level ability in his game. I'm not really finding it. Maybe it's there, I don't know. This is a guy who's very smart, well-rounded, going to be a good center, and the Bruins need good centers, even though this is not the first-line center upside they're looking for. I don't think there's any of that at this point in the draft, so it's a good pick. Some coffee. For Vancouver here, if I'm thinking about what they will do, I think they'll probably pick Malhotra with their first pick and then go for a defenseman here. I had Chase Reed going there, so I think you got to go with a high upside forward. And for me, that's Marcus Ruck. Liam Ruck gets put up as the top, the guy who's going to go in the first round while Marcus falls a little bit. I think I'm actually higher on Marcus's game just because, not to the same level, but I feel like he kind of has that ability, like I said with Nikita Klepov, where he's got eyes on the back of his head. He's just got such insane offensive smarts. Again, other than that, I don't see a ton of projectability in his game. I don't really see him fitting a role in a bottom six. And do I see a top line best forward on a playoff team potential? No, not really. But I think he's just got such high hockey IQ, especially in the offensive zone, where I think he can get over his lack of physical tools and be able to find a role in a top six in the NHL. He's obviously a great complementary piece. We saw how well he fit in with the Medicine Hat Tigers this year, a super team, and he was not the driver of the team really, but he was able to work off every other player on that team so well. And yeah, obviously, I think the Canucks make a lot of sense for the Ruck brothers just because of the storyline and all that, but I think this would also, like, if Marcus Ruck's name was John Smith and he had no siblings in this draft, I still think he would be a really good pick at this selection. Just because I do think he has that next level ability, and I think I like him a little bit better than Liam, even though Liam has a little bit more projectability. I can see Marcus being such a great complementary piece in a team's top 6. So with the Senators spot at 25th, maybe they trade this one as well. I honestly kind of expecting them to. I think they need some more high-scoring wingers. I'd be okay with Matt Coronado for this pick, just saying. But anyways, Ottawa, who do I like at this pick? Their defense can maybe use another guy. I don't know. They seem to really want to improve their defense. I felt like that was kind of their strength this season. Like, trading out Jordan Spence would be a terrible idea. I don't think they should be trying to improve their defense. So I'm going to go with a forward here. And it's kind of an interesting slot where you kind of want guys who are going to be big right away. I'd kind of like Yegor Shilov here, even though I have my problems with him. Marcus Nordmark makes some sense. Jackson Cover. I'm going to go with Alexander Command here, though. Yeah, I think I am. He's a guy who's obviously, he's been projected at that 17 spot to LA a ton and has kind of worked his way into the lottery conversation. I don't really see that, and I'm still a little bit higher on Suvanto. But Command, I think he has some great physical tools. Obviously been a high riser in this class, and is a guy who maybe doesn't have the same defensive floor as Suvanto does. I think Suvanto is such a good bet for a third-line center. Command maybe isn't the best bet for a third-line center, but I think he has, a bit more offensive possibility than Suvanto, where maybe he fits in as like a second-line center type of spot, and I think that's why we've been seeing him rise so much in the second half of the season, because I think teams are starting to say, maybe this guy could be a second-line center. And I think he would still be a good pick for the Senators, even though I'm not super high on him. For the Rangers here, who did I have them going with their first pick? Caleb Malhotra. I don't know why I had to think that. I was thinking Carell's in my head so much just because, I've locked in that pick happening in real life in my head. I think this is maybe a spot where Hurlberg could go. He's a guy with a high ceiling and put up obviously a ton of points in the WHL, but I'm just not quite as high on him as many others. But he's still such a great high offensive spot. Sorry, I'm talking terrible right now. It's been a while. I think Jack Hextall is a guy I'm pretty high on as well. I'm going to go with Hurlbert, though. A right wing, smaller, put up a ton of points this year, and it'll be good to see him go to college next season. It was kind of cool how he did like the WHL, take a year off, and then go to college. I really like that he was kind of a trailblazer in that path, and we'll see how it turns out for him. And I think going to college will be really good for his game. Sorry about that if you heard that. But yeah, really interesting player here who, again, I don't really see a bottom 6 player here at all. And do I see, a top line forward? No. But I think he's a guy with a lot of not a lot of projectability, but that high enough IQ that I think he would be able to make it work in the NHL on a top 6 if he was able to kind of round out the rest of his game enough to kind of be able to be competent in that spot. So yeah, I think that's a good pick for the Rangers, who again, they just kind of need everything, and I think that's a good pick for them as a guy who can hopefully, if everything goes out well, can be a foundational piece of that rebuild. San Jose at 27 with their third pick of the first round, and maybe they trade this one as well for a defenseman. I don't know. But yeah, you got Stenberg, you got Gustafsson, two guys I'm extremely high on. And for this, you don't need to hit a home run swing. You're just kind of trying to hit a double. I don't know much about baseball. I feel like that's a good reference, right? But yeah, for this, I'm going with Hawkinson. I'm a little bit higher on him than Pipparainen, even though Pipparainen is the right-handed defenseman, which is obviously better. But Hawkinson, he's not quite on that Gustafsson level of projectability and defensive smarts, but I think he is definitely trending that way, where even though he's not, playing like full-time SHL minutes yet, he looks good, he's defending well, and I think he has all the tools and is developing those systems, has a decently high defensive IQ, And I think he'll get to the point where he's able to, move the puck well enough to be a full-time NHL defenseman, somewhere on a middle or bottom pair. Not a high ceiling swing, but a lot of projectability here with Hawkinson. For the Montreal Canadiens, this is an interesting pick. I think I'm going to go with Liam Ruck. Obviously, it would be great to see the brothers go together, but I'm just going on what would be the best player for the team. For Montreal, I think they might go with Morozov. I think makes a lot of sense there. Don't know if they're going to go with like a defenseman or something, but I think Liam Ruck makes a lot of sense. As you know, they already have all of those core pieces in place. And Ruck, even though I don't know if he'll be like the second line, I think he would obviously be a guy who works well with Demidov if you want to put him there. But yeah, we saw how well he played with a high IQ player in Marcus Ruck this season, and he's just a finisher. He's just a guy who can, be a great complementary piece. Even though he's usually going to be the third best player on a line, I feel like he could be a really great third best player on your third line who can, obviously the defensive floor needs to improve, but I think his offensive IQ is pretty high and is definitely enough that he can use his tools like his shot, his net front ability to create offense, finish offense, and be a net positive out there. With the Blues' 4th first-round pick in the draft, I don't even know who to go with here. Very strange. Igor Shilov is a good bet. I'm going to go with him. He was playing in the Q, and he definitely, his habits aren't there. Like, his defensive game, I'm not a big fan of his attitude, which is why, even though I think this guy has a high ceiling, I don't have him in that, upper first round. But it's still a guy who shows a lot of offensive smarts and was able to dominate the QMJHL this year and dominate for long stretches of time when a lot of other guys in the Q, like Dagenet, kind of struggled at points. Shilov was pretty dominant the entire season. And I think Matvei Gridin has kind of changed my opinion on the Q in some ways because, like, for a few years there, I was so low on the Q and I'm just like, no good players are coming out of here. It's just such a risk to draft players out of there. And I believe Shilov is going to college, right? Let me search it up. Sorry, this is embarrassing. He's not committed. I thought he was committed to a college. I don't know why I thought that. But still, I think he's a player with... But still, I think Shilov is a high offensive IQ player who I don't see him as a center at the next level, but can definitely provide some really great playmaking and just overall offensive ability in his middle six if he's able to raise up the rest of his game. Decent skater as well. So I think there's definitely some great tools there with Igor Shilov. With the Flames' 2nd first-round pick, taking Viggo Bjork with the first one, and I think a defenseman here makes a lot of sense. Even though I'm not super high on a lot of these defensemen... Actually, I'm going to go... Yeah, that's the guy I want to go with. Nicholas Aram Olsen. He's a kind of a forgotten guy in this class, given I forgot he existed just a few picks ago. But he's a guy I'm really hoping the Flames will select with the 30th overall pick. Even though he's more of a bet to slide into the 2nd round, I think he's a guy who just has that goal-scoring ability. He just has that knack for goal-scoring that there's not a ton of in this draft. There's a lot of guys like Ruck, like Shilov, Marcus Ruck, that being Hurlburt, that have great playmaking ability, really high offensive IQ, but you don't really see him as a finisher at the next level. Aram Olsen is definitely a player with his holes, but his biggest strength is his goal scoring and his elite shot. His shot is top 5 in this draft, I think. So I think, obviously, there's a long way to go with Aram Olsen, but for the Flames, who are still in the midst of a rebuild, they can wait for him for 4 years to develop the rest of his game. I hope we bring him over to North America if we draft him, but he's a guy who just has that knack for goal scoring, that great ability, and I think that's really hard to find. And although the rest of his game is definitely behind, and has a hockey IQ, I don't think it's the highest part of his game. I'm not a big fan of where he takes his shots from sometimes, which is why I don't have him higher. But I think he could be a really interesting goal scorer. And I don't really know where he fits in at the next level, but having that one great ability, I think you'll always find your way. For the Hurricanes, they're going to go with whoever falls out of like Hurlburt, the Rucks. They're going to go with, someone with a high ceiling, I'm sure. And I like their drafting. I think it's a good idea. Where is he? Adam Gollier makes a lot of sense, I think. The right side of their defense is, good. every part of their team is good. But I feel like Golier is a good balance for the Hurricanes in where he has some high upside, but a decent floor as well. He definitely had his growing pains this year playing in a higher level men's league and playing against much better players. He was a little bit slow to adjust. He definitely made like a comparison. I kind of think of, not a comparison, but sometimes like defensemen, they make those smaller mistakes that you don't notice as much. Golier is a guy who he's going to make the Evan Bouchard mistake once in a while. He's going to have an absolute gaffe, which makes him look really bad. I think that's had him drop down a lot of draft boards, but he's a really smart defenseman, I think. I think for the most part, his defensive tools are pretty solid. I mean, obviously not quite there, not 100% refined, but he shows the tools, especially offensively, too. I don't think he's going to be some crazy power play point producer, but I think he could have some really good transitional ability if developed correctly. Pretty smooth skater, pretty good puck mover, and I think he's a very Hurricanes pick. And for them, you're just going with a guy who has high upside since you just have great players all across your lineup. And finally, with the Senators, we know they're not trading this pick. Maybe they could make a handshake deal that they draft a player at this pick and then trade it, because they're not allowed to trade this pick, but I guess they could trade the prospect. I don't know. But I think Jackson Cover is the pick here. Nordmark, by the way, is a player, given all my kind of draft tendencies, high upside guys, you'd think I would really love Nordmark, but I just don't love him that much. I don't really see him as a play driver, and obviously, his defensive game is so bad. Hermanson was a guy I'm pretty high on still, even though he doesn't show those habits. Nordmark is just on a do not draft list for me. But anyway, Jackson Cover, a very interesting story here. We'll look at the little review here. But obviously, only started playing ice hockey the last few years. And I think that's one thing I've really noticed in the draft the last few years. One of the biggest targets you want to go for is those guys that took those huge leaps, like Beckett Senecki. He was a guy who took that huge leap in the second half of his draft year. And obviously, he's looking really good right now. Guys who are, they might have really high pedigree from before, but stagnate, like a Shane Wright, they don't seem to turn out as well a lot of the time. So that's kind of made me higher on Cover, thinking more of that. Even though, I don't know what his role is going to be in the NHL. I could definitely see a really solid offensive middle six winger. But he took that huge leap, and I'm wondering, maybe there's some huge untapped potential here we don't know about. And I think Cover would be a great pick for the Senators. Even though I didn't go with a defenseman for them, I went with Command and Cover. Those are two guys who I think, have some solid projectability, especially in Command's case, but maybe have that next level of offensive potential that we don't know about. But yeah, so here is the full draft. I'll scroll through it for you. Hopefully you can see this very well. But McKenna, Stenberg, Reed, Verhoff, Malhotra, Bjork, Karels, Smits, Gustafson, Lawrence rounds out the top 10. Rudolph, Cullen, Preston, Belshets, Klepov, Lynn, Hermanson, Hemming, Blyle, Dagenet, Volneuve, Novotny, Suvanto, Ruck, Marcus, Bing, Command, Hurlbert, Hawkinson, Liam Ruck, Shilov, Aram Olsen, Golier, and Jackson Cover. So a really fun mock draft. I'm glad I did that. It's always fun, even though I don't think the draft will go anything like this. This is what I would do as the GM of these teams. This is my favorite draft, obviously. I wasn't really high on a lot of the guys I'm taking in the late first round, and which is why I was kind of indecisive. It's between so many players I'm not that high on. But I still think there's some very interesting bets, and I think this will be such an exciting draft with all the trades and crazy picks we're going to get. I'm so excited. This is like my Super Bowl. I love the NHL draft, and being a Flames fan, we finally have some decent picks in the draft. We're not picking 16th overall every year. So yeah, I am so excited, but let me know down in the comments below what you are thinking with this draft. Any picks you disagree with, who you think is going to be a steal in this draft, who you think is going to be a bust, all the trades you think are going to happen. Like, by the time I publish this, it's probably the draft order will be completely different. The 4th overall pick might be traded. But yeah, let me know down in the comments. Like the video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to see more videos like this, and happy drafting, everybody.